Minuets by the great composer Johann Sebastian Bach. Welcome everyone. It's just wonderful to be with you here this afternoon. And we're going to be exploring a program of creativity and musical composition and the creative impulse, like what the factors that go into inspiring people to make and create music and any type of art. And so that little piece was by the great composer, as I said, Johann Sebastian Bach, who inspired centuries of composers after him in his method of composition. And I played that on a little flute. This is actually the Baroque flute, the instrument that piece was written for. And this one was made in Germany by a wonderful Baroque flute maker. His name is Simon Pollack. So our next piece, I'll actually switch to the modern flute. And it's a piece by the Brazilian composer Heitor Villa-Lobos, and it's from his series of compositions called the Bachianas Brasileiras. So they were pieces that were inspired by the great composer Johann Sebastian Bach, and he was inspired to use also Brazilian folk melodies in his pieces. So he's basically taking what he learned from studying Bach's method of composition, voice leading and harmony, and then he's using for inspiration the folk melodies of his native Brazil. And so this particular piece is the aria from the Bachianas Brasileiras number 5.
Our next work is originally for an instrument called the arpeggione. Sometimes instruments have come into fashion and then they disappear. The arpeggione is one such instrument. It was originally an instrument that was a cross between a cello and a guitar. And so the job of the arpeggione player we handed off to Rhonda today. And the author is Franz Schubert, who is a very interesting and sensitive human being. In music, we have major keys that people tend to associate with jubilation or happiness. It's very speculative as to why this is. We also have minor keys, which people suggest are more shaded and more somber. So in this piece, Schubert does a wonderful job of exploiting the expressive qualities of these two modes that evolved and became very powerful influences or very powerful creative impulses, inspirations for composers. And so we'll just play the first movement. This is the Arpeggione Sonata by Franz Schubert. So that music was composed in the 19th century. For contemporary composers, there's different types of inspiration, obviously from changes in technology. This next composer is named Leo Brouwer, and at the period, very eclectic composer, but at the period where he wrote this piece, he was doing a lot of film scoring. So the opening part of this piece, this elegy for the dance, sounds very much atmospheric, like it's a film score. But then he breaks into a very lively dance. He says that the older generation was influenced by great musicians like Andres Segovia. He said, but our generation was influenced very much by the Beatles. So there's some nice dancing rhythms in this piece. This is Elohio della Danza by Leo Brouwer. we join in, we'll play some music by Astor Piazzolla. He was, he went to Europe, as did many of his people of that generation, to study with the great Nadia Boulanger. She had no children, she had no husband, no life really outside of music and her students. That was her thing. That was her day job, her night job, that's what she did. So everybody flocked to this woman with great love and respect. And one of them, and they came from all over the world. Villalobos did, Philip Glass was one of her later students, so there were a lot of musicians came from Europe, a lot from South America, North America, and Astor Piazzolla was no exception. So he got on the boat, went over to France, and joined the salon of composers and who studied with Nadia. And she said to the young Astor Piazzolla, she said, well, you can stay here and you can be a kind of a second-rate European musician, or you can go back to Argentina and be the master of the tango. And he chose to stay. No, he went back to Argentina.
She helped him find his inspiration.
His inspiration.
Yes, his inspiration was the tango. He wasn't inspired by the European music. So.
Though it finds its way into this music. So, do you want to talk about the four pieces?
Yeah. I would just say that it's this piece that we're going to be playing is called The History of the Tango. And so he basically studied the tango throughout the previous century. So the first piece is called Bordel, 1900, which was speaking to the origins of the tango, which were in the seedy bordellos of Buenos Aires. So the first one is Bordel. Then we have Café, 1930, and this was when the tango started to move into cafes. It was showing up in Paris. It was became a more sophisticated dance, a more sophisticated type of music. Then he moves into the 1930s, where tango became more of kind of a nightclub kind of dance music, more way hipper, a little bit more contemporary. And then the very last piece is called Concert aujourd'hui, the tango of today. He very much saw it as an evolving art, as an evolving style. So.
faces, people that we enjoy being with here in Coeur d'Alene. And recently we had a very enjoyable meal together, and we all got to talking about, well, what's the inspiration for writing music? If you're going to write a piece, well, where does it come from? And it varies quite a bit, you know. But what we decided to do when we would tour, particularly when Rhonda was living in Sandpoint, and we would go to places, and I'd say, well, I'm from Spokane. And people would say, well, that's like near Seattle, isn't it? Like, sometimes people, they didn't really know where this place was. So we thought we would write some music to kind of try to tell them what it was like here in our fair area, in Coeur d'Alene, Spokane area. And so we wrote a collection of pieces called The Four Seasons in the Northwest, and we'll tell you a little bit about each of them, and we'll see if you can find some imagery or something that to relate to in them. But we sure did, and we sure got a real kick out of sharing these with people who are here in this part of the country and elsewhere. So if you want to begin, tell me.
Yeah. So the first piece is called Fall, the Fall, I should say, and I think to me the inspiration was just feeling like a leaf that's just the first yellow leaf that starts to fall off the aspen tree or the birch tree. And you're falling and you have no idea where you're going to land. And I think that was the inspiration for that. And then we decided to use the alto flute on this. This flute is pitched a fifth lower than the regular concert C flute. It's used, Stravinsky used it quite a lot in his compositions. The Rite of Spring has just a lot of really beautiful, really earthy alto flute solos in it, and it's used quite often in jazz as well. So it seemed like the appropriate instrument for this particular piece, the Fall. next piece. It's called Crystalline, and it's inspired by good old North Idaho winters. And perhaps like a day watching like the icicles melt on off the roof.
So the concept behind this one is fairly straightforward, though harder to appreciate this year because it never really got all that cold, you know. So, I mean, my daughter had her feet in Coeur d'Alene Lake in February, so she's a kid though. But so the concept is this: if you remember, like the winter of 2008. Or if you've ever woken up with 10 inches of snow on the first day of spring, this is kind of what this is all about. It has these really bitter, cold chords that permeate the piece, but you have spring in the form of the flute trying to bring its way into this, trying to come to life. So you'll hear this. The piece will begin with these chords that are clusters and dissonant chords, and slowly the warm breath of spring will prevail. Or I shouldn't have said that because that gives it away, but that's what's going to happen. So anyway, this is spring. Well, it's nice to have my old friend Rhonda back. We started teaching at North Idaho College, I don't know what, 15, 20 years?
Your daughter was in a stroller, and
Yeah,
she's what, a junior
16
now in high school?
So, yeah, and we just, you know, and she used to live in Sandpoint, and our families would hang out, and we would go sit by Lake Pend Oreille. And whenever we travel, we tell people about Lake Pend Oreille is one of the most beautiful places on earth. And so we wrote a piece in dedication to the spirit of Lake Pend Oreille. It's called Ghosts of the Ancient Lake. Do you want to elaborate? You're going to play a flute.
And it utilizes, in part of it, we use the little Native American flute. This is a plain style Native American flute that I got in the Southwest. It's made out of cedar wood, has five holes in it. Surprisingly similar to the Baroque flute, which, you know, when you think about how this evolved in North America, this evolved in Europe, it's interesting that the similarities from centuries ago when there was no travel in between the two. Anyway, our inspiration, the Native American flute.
Thank you all for coming this evening. This afternoon. It's been a real joy, a real honor to play for you. And we never come to Coeur d'Alene without Spanish music. So we've got to play a Spanish piece. This is Polo by the Spanish composer Defaya. He wrote a set of songs for his wife, who is an opera singer. And this is the 7th of the 7 songs. So once again, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure to play for you. We brought along a lullaby. This is also from Defaya, from the 7 songs. This is called Nana.
be back next winter, New Year.
So